front of you is basically a draft agreement that our attorneys, along with Irene Google from Walter Hofvp, have been working on for the last year. The onus behind this deals with infrastructure. What happens if a pipe breaks underground at Hofvp Village? Who's responsible? What happens if there are some other infrastructure concerns? Who's responsible for the payment if something goes awry? So collectively, we came together to work on these agreements. Again, what you have in front of you is a draft, and we'll have Bruce Soares, our outside legal counsel with Driving Custody, can give you a summary of what these documents are all about.
Well, I got the other documents. I was just handing something here now, but is this different than the other documents?
These are some revisions to the original document that has been worked on, and so let Bruce explain it, or Bruce will explain it.
Yeah, so the changes are very, very minor. I can explain them all to you. The first is a change in definition. We were referring to a term called Hofvp Village Controlled Infrastructure. And there was a concern that using the word controlled would lead to an incorrect implication because the infrastructure is not controlled by the Hofvp Village. So we redesignated that and called it now certain designated infrastructure. The importance of that is when you look at those lines, so water, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, dedicated roads, when you look at those and they're identified in the exhibits, those are the improvements that the Hofvp Village is assuming responsibility for under the operations agreement for maintenance and repair. Now, there are some of those, there's a subset of those which are also identified as critical components. And those are very important, and those are lines and infrastructure that will service residents, if you will, within the Hofvp Village, within the tourism district, development district, and those that are outside. Or they service residents within the TBD, which are not affiliated with the Hofvp Village LLC. The cities retain special rights in connection with the maintenance, okay, the repairs, the replacement, the implementation of those infrastructure items. So really the first change was just definitional. All we did is we changed Hofvp Village controlled to designated infrastructure because we thought that would avoid any confusion.
But that term is in there probably 20 or 30 times, which resulted in, I think, you put out full agreement the second time, so it shouldn't be a one-time change.
And then the second change. So how many of the second changes?
6.2, police and fire.
Oh, yes. So let's talk about that because we've had discussions throughout with the Hofvp Village. And as we discussed last time I was before your council, the city, with respect to annexed properties, is agreeing to provide standard police and fire services as it does everywhere else throughout the city. Now, as it relates to special events and specific events that the Hofvp Village LLC is going to be responsible for, and is going to be responsible for retaining private security and private safety. What we try to address is how will those needs be met? And we've been talking a lot about that. And that's changed. So let's talk about what the language says today and then where we ultimately can go. The way we are proposing to structure is that the city, police, and the safety services will, in all of those circumstances where the Hofvp Village LLC has the obligation and the control, they will have the first right to provide those services. Now, the language also introduces the concept of competitive pricing. So under that circumstance, the city services will be, appropriate city services will be approached, the pricing and the terms of the engagement will be submitted. At that stage, if it's acceptable, then the parties will move forward and the city will provide those services and Hofvp Village LLC will pay for those. If there's a concern regarding the competitive nature of the pricing and the terms, Hofvp Village will then look to either its other options or get a different quote. At that time, if we're within at least 10 or 15% is in the document. 10. If we're within 10%, the city services will be performed by the city. If we're not within 10%, then the developer will come back to the city and give the city the second look at the opportunity to say, we're going to go forward on these reduced terms, or we're not. I think that's what we discussed. And so I think what that does is it provides an opportunity for the city, obviously in all instances at its discretion, to make the proposal. I think it also gives the city an opportunity, if in fact the rates and the terms are not competitive, to at least be able to come back in and say, okay, we have an election. We can meet those terms, or we can let a third party perform the services.
Is this similar to like what we do with the Civic Center and the police up there for private functions on a higher basis?
I think we do, I'll give you an example of that, I think. The Civic Center is a city-owned building, which
Right.
makes a very different situation than with the Hall of Fame. Right, explain what the Civic Center.
They bid them out. They have a set rate that they do, and they bid them out based on a certain rate. Is that what you're asking me? Yes. They have a contract.
Is this
They have a
similar
contract.
to that,
They have a
or am I
contracted rate.
misinterpreting?
They have a contracted rate that they pay the officers when they perform services at the Civic Center, correct? With them, correct?
All right, is this similar to what we're trying to do here too?
This is similar to what we're trying to do, but there is a difference between police and fire.
Okay.
The difference is with police, as Director Perry stated, they have a set rate already when they're performing services, let's just say an outside function,
On off-duty time.
off-duty
Up to
time.
your time.
And those dollars that they earn do not come to the city, they go directly to that officer.
They're not part of their pension, they're not part of the city's general fund, income or outgo.
So that's what's germane with police. With fire, currently, if there's a football game at Vincent Stadium, right now what's happening is there's a private ambulance service that sits there. They do not charge the Hall of Fame. So if a young kid, little Johnny breaks his leg, that ambulance service transports that young man to the hospital, and that ambulance service bills that family's insurance company. So it's, I just want you to understand the difference there.
I think that is,
Let me ask you something on that.
Yeah.
You say it's competitive when someone hires a policeman at the civic center? In other words, what they're saying it's going to be competitive, like, say we charge 40 and the private charges 15, we're going to go with 15, right?
No, I don't know what you mean by competitive. We have a set rate.
No, I mean, they have a set rate when they're working on off-duty job.
Extra jobs.
Right, so it's not competitive, right?
No, it's not competitive.
But
We have-
the hall is going to be competitive.
but the difference is, and tell me about, if there's a wedding, if I'm having a wedding at the Civic Center,
Right.
does the contract at the Civic Center require me, I'm the bride's father, to hire a Canton off-duty police officer?
There's no.
Because it is a city-owned building.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm saying that's why we require that, is because it's a city-owned building.
Okay,
Correct.
well, then how
It's
about,
never been required at the Hall of Fame when it was, previously owned and operated by the school system and/or now, at this point in time, by the Hall of Fame, because it's not a city-owned building, but we're not involved in that contractual relationship anymore.
I understand that, but like say through the church-owned church, they always have a city policeman.
Just by choice.
Right, they can have their private too. They want-
Right.
But private can't arrest, they can't do nothing.
Right, no, hiring a city police officer is a preferential thing for somebody, whether you're, at one of the bars or something for security, or
Right.
whether you're, and the Hall of Fame hires a lot of police officers off duty too, and so do the churches and so forth, because they're preferential security, they can't make an arrest. And it's also preferential to us, because the more police officers we have out in uniform, the
No, I understand.
more citywide protection.
But what I'm saying is, I think they charge maybe 40 an hour, I don't know what it is. What do they get?
It depends if alcohol is involved and
They get a
alcohol
little
is not involved.
Right.
correct.
Right, so in other
There are
words,
set rates,
so what you're telling us is at the hall, if a private wants to charge 20 and we charge 40, they're going to take the 20, correct?
Well, they have the option.
That, we have the option to come back and count it back,
Correct. That's correct.
but me, no. Okay.
The term that keeps getting used is we. This really isn't, the city's not benefiting nothing out of that, right?
No.
'Cause that's going straight to the business.
Right, correct, right.
It's extra.
And again, currently what's happening now is the Hall of Fame has chosen to use private service because there is no hourly charge. There is no hourly charge with ambulance.
No, we don't do that. We're talking about
Just
police
wanted-
now, I think.
Yeah.
No, I think the Hall of Fame does use our things still quite frequently for off-duty police. Again, because they're a preferential service in it.
So really, because this is already, it sounds like it's already terrible, and like you said, it's a preference. So really, the biggest thing with this is the ambulance services. That's correct.
I got a real quick question, because I think sometimes when we say things, there's always two different interpretations. When you started off in breaking this down to us, one of the comments that you made was, we provide police and fire as we do with every annexation. Once we annex you in, then it's our responsibility to provide the basic services of police and fire. But in the next breath, we're saying, however, they can opt to provide their own services. So for special events or, well, actually within their village. My concern with it is, by annexation, we provide these services, but if they opt not to use these services, are we liable for anything that their services provide? Because the village is technically within the city, and it is our responsibility to provide those services, but now we're saying a special event, they can provide their own EMTs, they can provide their own police, or their own security, I should say. What liability are we looking at if something goes wrong in that area, if anything?
So I can try and answer your question. The concept is that we will provide the standard police and safety services that we do throughout the entire city. If there's an event today outside of the Hall of Fame Village, and as a result of that event, perhaps it has to be permitted. And as a result of that permitting, you have to have a certain number of security guards, whether that be Canton City Police off-duty or otherwise. If it's a ball game, and you have to have safety services. Today, those can be provided either utilizing city services or utilizing private services. So I don't think what we're proposing, Councilman, adds any degree of liability to the city that we don't have with respect to every other event that goes on today. Now, all we're contracting to do, though, is to continue to perform standard services as we would otherwise throughout the city. So the intention is not to say you don't have to use our services, but if you don't, we're assuming a certain amount of liability, because I don't think we're doing that. I think we're essentially saying we're going to create an environment that's commensurate with what exists today. We will provide the same services that we do citywide today, and we're striking an agreement whereby the city will get first right of refusal on the private services to be performed.
Okay. Thank you.
I tried to delve into this contract a little bit more. I spoke with the leader earlier today to try to get an understanding. And I have an understanding of this issue specifically with respect to fire and special events at the Hall of Fame. Fire, chairman of the judiciary, kind of get tasked with different ordinances and things like that. And I'm sure you have as well. Fire wants the opportunity to be able to perform services at the Hall of Fame for special events, right? And what do we mean by that? You know, obviously if there's a fire at the Hall of Fame, privates aren't going to be putting out fires, that's what they call us. But when you watch like the Hall of Fame game on television, when the camera pans out, you know, we want to see a City of Canton ambulance sitting there on the sidewalk. We don't want to see it private ones in the City of Canton. I think Hall of Fame is a staple of our city. And so the firefighters have made it clear that we have arrangements and policies in place when extra services are needed for police officers. They can hire off-duty cops and they would go in at set rates. We want the same opportunity. And so after a lot of discussion and working with our counsel, Mr. Soares, they've brought this issue to the Hall of Fame. And currently, the Hall of Fame does use City of Canton police officers for their special events. And we have a set hourly rate. I think that is $35 to $40 an hour or something like that. And the reason why they use City of Canton police officers is because they can't get the services anywhere else. And you were just talking about this a second ago, Danny, because our police officers can't arrest them. Buckeye Security Services, while they'd be maybe cheaper, maybe not, because $30, $40 an hour is a pretty reasonable rate. It's apples and oranges for a security service versus a police officer. And the whole thing wants that. Because if there's trouble, they want someone to be able to take into custody immediately. And so we, and certainly our unions have advocated this, and it's good policy too, that when those services are going to be provided, if we're competitive, they should give our employees the opportunity to take the first crack at it. Because even though they're going to be off duty, this is work that we should keep in-house. There's no doubt that the police department is always going to be competitive in providing the services for, if no other reason, they can't get it anywhere else. The only place you can get in the city of Canton or anywhere in Stark County these types of services where you can actually arrest someone is from the Stark County Sheriff's Department. Our rates are identical to theirs. So there's never a set of facts where we're not going to be competitive. Then with fire is, I've had conversations with both the president of the union today in detail about this. They are going to be putting in place a rate schedule that looks very, very similar to the police department's rate schedule. The police department did a good job in creating theirs. Their policies short and concise and clear in terms of what their responsibilities are. And so we will then have the option for when our firefighters work 24 on, 48 off, that when there are firefighters who want extra shifts on their own time, the Hall of Fame is going to have to come to us first. If there's the Hall of Fame meeting, if there's the, what's up, Kevin?
Because you keep using we. Ambulance is going to be different. Because now we got a bus sitting out there that's costing the city money.
And they'll have to pay for that. And let me explain how that's going to work and how it works with police, because police have cruisers. So when someone hires our Canton officers to work off duty, they would pay the hourly rate to the police officer directly. And for the cruiser, they write a check to the city. The city gets reimbursed for that cost. And so, I mean, because those are city assets, right? We're not just out here a private employment agency for different people. If they're using our services out there, which is great to have them there, but the city's going to get paid for that expense. It would work the same way with the fire department. So when the camera zooms out and you see a city of Canton ambulance sitting there, the taxpayers are going to be refunded for having that ambulance there. The mechanics of it should work fine. If we have the officers, if the fire departments are available to have somebody to do it, because it's the right of first refusal. If we can't do it, then they go somewhere else.
Are these on-duty firefighters or off-duty firefighters?
Off-duty firefighters.
Okay.
And so if we have an ambulance that's available, then we'll be able to do it. And the city will get paid for having that ambulance there. If, for whatever reason, we don't have an ambulance available, then they would go to a private. Or we don't have firefighters available, then go to a private. The unique to the fire issue, there are opportunities where the Hall of Fame gets those services for free from a private ambulance company because they will put their ambulance there at a high school game just because they want to be advertised. And so they'll take a loss on it, and that's a business decision that that ambulance company makes. Under those circumstances, the Hall of Fame still have to come to us and say, City of Canton, we're willing to get for this particular event these services for free from private ambulance. Is it important enough for you that you want to, for instance, pay your employees overtime to provide those services at your cost? That's probably not going to be something that we'd be able to do, but maybe if it's an important enough event like the Hall of Fame game, because of the publicity, we would be able to do that. But that would be then the decision of the chief and Andrea to make that call. The bottom line is, when you look at the grand scheme of the services that are going to be required at the Hall of Fame, our fire department, at least according to the union president, our rates are far more competitive than the rates of the private ambulance services. And the reason is because we're not a for-profit operation. With our rates of a fire department staff being comparable to 30, 45 bucks an hour for a licensed medic and City of Canton ambulance services at a very reasonable hourly rate, if it's a purely competitive market and someone's not trying to get an advertising advantage, we're going to get that contract every day. And that's all our safety officers, as I understand it from my conversations with them today, is what they want, is an opportunity to provide these services first, because if it's even playing field, we're going to be able to provide those services. And I do think that there's something to be said about the increased safety of it. You know, our fire department, all of them are trained paramedics. There's the upside to making sure that it's our personnel there on the sidelines and not private. Yeah.
I have a couple questions on the concept. The first one would be, who calculates the cost? Because obviously there's going to be cost in the ambulance. Who is calculating that rate to make sure that the reimbursement to the city would cover any cost for that ambulance to be there? And then the second thing is, who actually is the, I guess, acts as the agency to book this? Is it booked through the city? Or is it booked through, I don't know how police currently book it, but I don't, if I have an event at my house and I want to book an off-duty police officer, do I go through the city? Do I go through the union?
You go
Do I
through the city, but
Okay.
it's paid directly to that officer. It doesn't come through.
They have an officer.
And is that how this would be?
Yes,
So-
the fire policy is going to mirror, they're working off of the police policy.
But I guess, so the calculation then of the rate for the portion that the ambulance then represents, who's calculating that? And how does that money get back to the city?
That,
Same way the police do.
the same way like a police cruiser would. And that, those rates are going to be established by the chief of police, and I'm sure subject to Andrew's approval.
And you also have to remember, though, if we don't have that bus, if that bus is sitting in a game, we probably don't have the manpower if those two EMTs are off that day. We probably don't have the manpower to have all of our buses out on the road anyway.
I guess, just when you, I guess the calculation of the rate of the ambulance, the only thing that I'm interested in learning more about, because there's not just the initial cost, there's the depreciation. How do you come up with a rate that is accurate, that represents the time for that vehicle?
It's for the police, it's an hourly rate, and I think it's $50 an hour for the time a cruiser is sitting there in private service. I have to imagine, calculating depreciation would be probably a pretty difficult thing to do. I'm sure it will be a similar rate for providing the ambulance, obviously, is in service. We're never going to take an ambulance out of service to do something like this. Probably be a similar hourly rate for our cruisers, plus reimbursement for the cost of any supplies that would be needed, should there be any kind of requirement to use those.
That goes to the family anyway.
Yeah.
Great point. Yeah.
I've been around quite a while, but I've never seen a policeman that's easy, because that's been on extra job, ever take a cruiser. These would take their own car. They never.
What we do see, like on the highway jobs, those are a lot of
No,
those are.
you're talking that, but I'm talking about special events.
Right.
They don't take.
They only take the cruiser for traffic.
Right.
So, just like we were saying on special events, they require so much security. Do they require ambulances too?
I think, I was at the Hall of Fame meeting, I mean, there are a lot of firefighters that are working those kinds of jobs and so forth, but they may all be fire prevention, but we probably have, I bet we have 20 or 30 firefighters, I think, at the Hall of Fame meeting, for example. Required by
But they're on
NFL
duty,
requirements and other
they're on duty because that's
requirements
their shift.
because of the size of the crowd and so forth. So
And
there's
how
all
big-
those other requirements, but I don't know about the EMS.
And that's a little different, because that is something that is reimbursed to the city. That's a little different. That's something that actually the Hall of Fame pays us back to the city. That's not considered, that's a little different. That one is a little
Well,
different.
that's correct. Do firefighters ever have outside jobs? In any circumstance, currently? I don't know.
Extra jobs? No.
You know, what I'm saying is,
They're always on
I'm
duty.
asking the
They're on
question.
duty.
They're always
To
on duty.
understand.
Right.
They're always on duty.
I'm just saying on special events, they require security. They require EMS too. I mean, we're talking about this, but, you know, that private might be just doing it just because. But if it's not in their agreement to whoever's using that stadium, why would they? That's what I'm saying. Is it in their agreement to have so much security and EMS present?
In our agreement with them,
No, in the Hall of Fame's agreement.
with like the NFL for the, like, as an
Yes,
example.
yes. I mean, I'm just saying, how can we enforce this if it's not that they have to do this?
I guess the only way that it would be something that we can enforce is if they're doing it, if it's something they do, because we all know that there's an ambulance sitting
Right,
at a
right.
football game. Why that ambulance is there, that's an excellent question. I don't know if it's just something they look at their own liability reasons to have an ambulance there.
Yeah, you know,
Being that there's an ambulance there, though, we know that to be the case, that if it is going to be there, they gotta give us the chance first.
And I agree with that. I agree with that.
I guess what happens, so from what I've heard, a private ambulance puts their ambulance there for free. They don't charge anything until you have to transport somebody. So I guess in the event that, how do we compete with that? How would our firefighters be able to compete with free?
We expect that that is not going to last forever, because there isn't any business model that I'm aware of where you continue to provide, because it is expensive to hire these private services. That I'm sure they like the PR now, but having, you know, a private ambulance service at the Glen Oak versus North Canton game, that's going to be a loss leader for them. When it becomes an even playing field and that company decides not to make that calculus anymore with the advertising, we are going to get that revenue.
Okay.
Every day.
So until that happens, seemingly the private will still be there. But eventually, because there's going to be more events, the calculation is, as more events happen, the cost of free increases, and they will then have to charge something. At that point, then our fire guys will be able to bid on it and be competitive.
Because we'll be cheaper. And it also has to do with not just the frequency events, but the scope of the events. The amount of services, in terms of personnel, as I understand it, that are required for like a Hall of Fame game, it's way more than one ambulance. It could be a few. And something like that would just be an incredible cost to provide for free by a private company. And our firefighters believe that based on the provisions I think that we're leading towards through the work of our council, that this is all they want, is just an opportunity to be competitive in providing services.
Well, then my other question is, then should we also, because what if this turns around where they make this competitive, but it's not in any agreement? I think part of this agreement should be, if someone gets hurt, the city should be called anyway. Go ahead, let me finish. Go ahead.
I think that we have a major obstacle in our way before we throw the what-ifs out there. We're talking about what we're going to charge for an ambulance. Currently, you know, we're financially strapped. The administration is doing what they can do to add more safety forces on. But we're never going to get to that point where we have 9 stations open, 9 EMSs on the street at any given moment. We are always going to be, until we take drastic steps, and those conversations are ongoing, until we take drastic steps, we're always going to have an ambulance or two sitting around. And I would much rather have a City of Canton ambulance sitting at a football game and us not make a penny on that ambulance, and for our 2 EMTs to make a little extra money to do a better job providing for their family than I would to have too many what-ifs and, well, maybe someday when we have more than enough EMTs, we can say, hey, listen, we're going to get competitive and we really want this work and you're going to pay us for everything. But I think we need to take care of our people first. And if there is any free advertisement, I think we need to grab it ourselves. The cost of the people are something that I feel our people need the opportunity to bid on that work first and foremost. And as a partner, we can't afford to sit and say we're going to charge you for an ambulance that's just going to be sitting in a garage somewhere, Jim, lady, ma'am, sorry.
That's one point. We're gonna price ourselves out
And hurt our guys.
right?
And hurt the safety of the people because they may say that they're better, but I don't believe that there are any safety services out there, private ambulance services or security that's going to do as good of a job as our people. And they deserve it, and I think that's what we need to protect first and foremost, is to ensure that we give them an even playing field. But we also got to remember that the Hall of Fame's a business. We're partners all the way up to the point of making that dollar. Everybody's got to make a buck.
I think that's well said, and I think the upside of the provision that we're looking at is it gives us that flexibility. That, you know, if it's important enough that we want to go ahead and pay our guys because they may be getting for free, we'll provide better services, and this will be on the city's time because it's that important. So I think this is a good resolution.
Do we have contractual language finished tonight, or will we have it by Monday night for everybody to look at?
Well, we will have it before Monday.
Okay.
They're going to put that together then?
Yes, yes, we will.
Is there an agreement on that language?
We have an agreement in principle, that's correct, I mean.
We need to add another sentence to that.
Okay.
It's in there, we got that far. So we do have an agreement in principle.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Question, perhaps more technical than anything else. Section 3 of the development agreement, and of course the agreements between the city and the Hall of Fame Village LLC. Section 3 deals with reimbursement for the most part of stadium improvements that have already taken place under the TIF agreement. It says the reimbursement is to what I guess is a separate legal entity called the Hall of Fame Village Stadium LLC, or is that a typo?
No, there are different entities that have been formed that will have different elements of the improvements. So as different improvements are completed, there may be different successor entities to the Hall of Fame Village
So
LLC.
the legal entity that handles the improvements is not the Hall of Fame Village LLC, it's a Hall of Fame Village Stadium LLC. That's a separate entity that's
Yes.
entitled to reimbursement after the fact, I might add, because it includes phase 1
Correct.
under the TIF provisions.
Yes. So
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. I know it's a small point. I didn't see the term Hall of Fame Village Stadium LLC in the recital, so that's the only place I see it. So, but okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Page 11, section 2.6,
I'm sorry, which agreement? Is this the operations of the development?
operations and maintenance.
Okay, very good. Thank you. 2.6?
Yes. No disrespect to the attorneys. I know you guys spent a lot of money and a lot of years getting educated. Sometimes you take something very simple and you make it very complicated to read. You had a lot of big words, a lot of ifs, ands, and buts. It kind of compares it to like reading the Bible. It's like hard to really understand until you really get close to God. And I'm not going to law school, so could you please clarify this section for me? Because my take on it is somehow I see zoning and part of it gives me the impression that you're able to circumvent our zoning, and the next thing you know, I'm going to be driving down 77 and I'm going to see this huge sign that was put on your property by Clear Channel, and it's going to have Aviance ads or whatever you want on it, and then on the other hand, it's kind of telling me, well, no, you still have to go through the city. It lost me completely.
Okay, well, I apologize for that. No, this does not and would not supersede zoning.
Okay.
All of the actions in A through E, which the Hall of Fame Village LLC can conduct, are all subject to the city's generally applicable rules and regulations, all applicable laws. Applicable laws is defined to include ordinances, state statutory provisions, etc. So all of these rights would be subject to the city's oversight as it relates to those provisions. So hopefully I can give you some comfort on that. The other thing this also does is it's also subject to the city's rights as it relates to critical components. And those are those areas within the TID, Tourism Development District, which relate to or affect residents within and outside. So we're not waiving any of the city's ordinary police powers, if you will, through zoning. Those would all still apply. The city's permitting powers would still apply, and the critical component rights would still apply.
Okay, then I think that we can omit the phrase, the Hall of Fame Village has the right at all times without prior consent of the city whatsoever. It's kind of like you're telling me that they can do whatever they want, but as long as they comply. It's, like...
Okay, well, and I can explain the way it would work. We can talk about some of the verbiage. Essentially, is no additional consent is required under this agreement, subject to all the applicable laws, ordinances, rules, and regulations of the city. And that's what the wording says. If it's ambiguous, Irene, we can talk about it and we can clarify that point.
Okay. Well, I did learn one lesson from our law director here at the city of Canton. He says, watch out for the little words, like may, might, shall. They'll screw you every time. All right, I'm sorry.
You done?
Yeah, I'm good with that one.
Anyone else? Anyone else? So we do it for Monday.
Oh, we just covered that, we're good. I'm good. I personally, if I can make some comments, I'd like to thank Kevin Lamadou and Fonda Williams and Edmund Mack. Edmund, for doing all your homework and taking a look at this today to make sure that we're good, and Kevin and Fonda for spending some time. I had a bunch of things in here, and they covered a lot of that today. I do think that sometimes when we get these contracts down, you're overbearing on the words. I mean, really overbearing on the words. Sometimes it's very difficult for us to decipher through. It's very difficult to read. Yeah, my wife could have been an attorney. I read her as well to read that. So.
You should have read it before they simplified it.
If I could just, if I have permission, just for with, is it okay?
She's good.
I just, in addition to complimenting everybody else, Bruce Soares, who represented us from Black McCuskey. I obviously didn't have my hands on this for a long period of time, but I mean, that one little provision that we were going back and forth on, we were burning down the phones, and it was, I think his suggestion is a very good suggestion that ultimately is going to be the language that we lead on, but I think it's a sensible solution for both parties. And so on behalf of the city, we appreciate your efforts, not just on that small provision, but in the entirety of these documents, because it's nothing's been done like this before, as I understand it, in the state of Ohio. This is the first one, and so you don't really have to go a template to go on, and I think you've done some excellent work on our behalf.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.